It is easier to get divorced than it is to get an investor off your cap table. If you're a founder, you have to decide if you want to be richer or if you want to be the king. I'm in a weird industry where I can lose a third of my money in a year. I got a good portfolio. Look for the logos that quietly disappeared. How a VC treats a startup that didn't perform tells you a lot more about the character of that investor than how they treat their star pupils.
Most founders only see entrepreneurship from one angle, theirs. They learn the hard lessons in real time with no map and no second chances. Today's guest has seen those lessons play out hundreds of times. Andrew Ackerman has built companies, invested in over 70 early stage startups, and worked closely with founders across accelerators and classrooms. He's seen what breaks companies early, what actually helps them survive, and which mistakes are avoidable if you know what to look for. He's also the author of The Entrepreneur's Odyssey. This conversation is for anyone building something and wanting to make fewer expensive mistakes. I'm Linda Vo, and this is Inspired by Success. Let's welcome to the show, Andrew Ackerman.
Thanks for having me, Linda.
It's a pleasure because I've got so many different questions because you've had a lot of experiences, and from our entrepreneur audiences, there's different perspectives that for me, I want to learn about too, but you've been on different sides. You've seen hundreds of founders up close, building, breaking, pivoting. So I want to know, what was the moment when you realized, oh, wow, the same things keep happening? Like, when did the pattern recognition really click for you?
You know, it's kind of hard to say. So I did start as an entrepreneur. I had a couple of companies, and then, I was starting to do a little bit of angel investing, but then you're seeing like 1, 2, 3 startups a month, looking into it. I guess it was when I first started looking at companies in the Accelerator context. So for people in your audience who aren't quite clear what that is, you've got like the VC funds, the venture capital funds that are looking for startups at different phases they can invest in. An accelerator gets involved 1.5 steps earlier. They're not quite ready to raise their first round. So they'll find those diamonds in the rough and they'll work with them intensely for typically 3 months, sometimes longer. And then they'll help them raise that first round. And that's, what I started doing at Dream It. For instance, I went from like, I get 2 or 3 startups a month. That's great. Maybe I'll invest, maybe I won't invest, to like, okay, Andrew, you got a program started in 2 months. You need to get 1,000 applications so you could pick 12 that are really good.
Wow.
So that was kind of a step level more. But then beyond that, I'm working with the startups that we select, the 12 that are in the program, plus or minus, every week for an hour or more, and helping them kind of make more progress in that 3 months than they made in the year prior. But that also means now I'm in 12 different businesses. Right. So now I'm getting deeper into the company. I'm learning about what they do, short of me actually being a founder. It's about as deep as you can get. And then I'm helping them raise their rounds after. So we started rinsing and repeating that. And as it went on there, I started to see some commonalities. You start to get to the point where it's like, I've seen this movie before. I kind of know how it's going to end. Let me help you out there. I don't remember an exact moment in time, but it's just started to get a little bit more like, okay, I know where this is going. And you start to pick up other tips and tricks to help them along their way, like a little faster, a little more efficiently, a little more predictably.
That's awesome. And so, because you've been on the different side, you've been a founder, investor, accelerator, director, and now a teacher. What did living all those 4 roles show you? Well, you could never understand from just one, because I'm guessing the more companies that you helped, the more experiences and the patterns that you see. So let's deep dive into a little bit about those certain patterns, and how did you find out which ones that you knew were going to be super successful, and which ones, you probably would have known the ones that are going to fail, I'm guessing.
Well, I would say, like, in the ideal world, in the ideal situation, the companies that you actually invest in, you should be equally convinced that they're going to succeed or fail. So every so often I see an investor say, yeah, I always knew this one was going to be the standing star, the star in my portfolio. And I feel like taking them aside or her aside and saying, like, if you didn't feel the same way about the other 20 companies in your portfolio, why did you invest in them? Right? You should be equally convinced of any company you're going to invest that they're going to be big. That's the way this thing works. So to say later, I kind of knew it at the time, you have to ask yourself, like, why did you bother with the other dogs then? So if I've done my job right and I've diligenced them the right way, and like I've dove into the company and I've talked to the founders, got a feel for them, I should be at the same level of conviction for any startup before I pull the trigger on it. Now, things may happen afterwards. Ideally, they're things that I couldn't have known beforehand, I mean, if I could have known them before, then shame on me. I messed up. But if something happens later and didn't know, COVID comes out of left field, or this was the one thing they couldn't test before and they tested it and it didn't work out, like that's okay. I've had founders come to me, I'm so sorry it didn't work out. I'm like, it's kind of baked in the system. You have not, Linda, personally failed me because your company didn't succeed. I invested in 12 companies at this early stage. I knew 3 of them were going to fail within a year. I knew 4 of them might fail within a year. And you know what? That's actually really good. That's a good record. I'm in a weird industry where I can lose a third of my money in a year and I got a good portfolio. Like, I know that. So you really should get to that point. But there are things you pick up along the way, right? So I'll give you a specific example. The quality of the team. You'll start off, you look at where they're from, what they've done, that stuff you kind of figure out pretty quickly. Like, oh, that's an A team, that's a B team, that's a C team. You kind of get that stuff, but it's the softer things around, are they going to be coachable? Are they the kind of people that can execute? That's when you start developing your gut on it. So I remember probably 2017, right? So we had gone through 2 years. I had gone through 2 years of running like a pre-seed generalist program. We then switched and we focused on ed tech, or the group that I span up did an ed tech program for a little over a year, 17 investments there. And I just built up this new vertical that dealt with construction tech and real estate related technologies, prop tech and construction tech. And I think this was maybe the first cohort of companies that I was doing in that sector, in that stage. And there was one startup that was a big, hairy, audacious, gamble. All right, it's the idea you could take it's called a BIM, a building information model, like a model or a digital twin of that building that you were going to build, which is complicated enough to make. And you could drag and drop it anywhere on the map. And it would automatically generate things like impact on traffic, impact on water consumption, even microclimates around a building if it was that tall. It was really a gee whiz product. The founder, when I first met him, I thought, okay, listen, he's done this before, had a startup before, he had the domain expertise, he had the relationships with the customers that made sense. I realized there's something about it that was I don't know if he's really listening, right? I feel like maybe he's just kind of waiting for me to stop talking so he can keep going. But you know what? Great company. He's got the bona fides for this. Let's go in. And it didn't work out. And it didn't work out in a way that was very much a didn't listen. He'd gone into a deal. He said that we were investing. We had not yet committed to invest yet. We only follow. That was our model back then. Then the elite investors are like, dude, you lied to us. And then they backed out. So I had that kind of gut, the guy kind of heard what he wanted to hear. So, but I overruled it because I fell in love with everything else. So that was probably the moment in time where I'm like, okay, I've got my sense. I'm not going to overrule it. It doesn't matter. Maybe I'll miss an opportunity that will pan out, but I'm not going to get into another situation where I have maybe a nagging reservation about a founder's coachability. So that was a very discrete point in time where I was like, I've learned that lesson. I'm not betting against my gut on this.
That's nice. Now, I just wanted to know how, if we could go backwards with this accelerator thing that you're talking about, and then you said you would put investments in for any startups or companies that are brand new and want to get capital. How does it work?
Yeah. So the short answer is it's a little bit of money for a lot of sweat equity and a little bit of cash. But let me kind of put it in context, right? So the venture capital funds will invest at different stages. You got some early stage venture capital funds that'll invest as little as a couple $100,000. And you got some later stage guys that are writing $100 million checks. I play in the early stage. So the first round of financing where you get kind of professional investors into your startup is usually called a seed round. You may have done a pre-seed or an angel round or friends and family round beforehand. But usually the first time, if you're raising 3, 5, 2, whatever $1 million, that's your seed round. And at that point, we're looking for certain things, but the accelerators get in kind of before that. It's like, okay, Linda, we know you're not there yet. So whereas a VC fund might say, okay, Linda, I'm going to give you $3 million and I'm going to get 20% of your company for that. And I'll give you kind of some advice and I'll sit on the board, but I'm kind of betting on you because I feel like you're at the right place where you need to be right now. And you don't need me to look over your shoulder. A VC is getting in much earlier. An accelerator is getting in much earlier. So an accelerator might write a check for $150,000, but get 7% of the company because they're
Oh,
taking a lot more risk and they're spending a lot more time kind of teaching the founder, helping the founder get further, introducing the founder to potential customers. So there's a lot more work on the part of the accelerator than on the VC. VC has a lot of work finding the companies, a lot of work diligencing them, writes the check, and then, come back in 3 months and we'll talk. It's a different process for an accelerator. So you get more equity to compensate you for the additional work and the additional risk that you're taking on.
like to say, for example, 7% equity beforehand.
Yeah,
That seems
plus or
okay.
minus 7%. And it might be $100,000, might be $200,000, but it's a tenth of what you would raise or less in your seed round.
And then you're still there alongside the company as soon as they grow to the next round, to the next stages and next
Yeah.
stages.
And our involvement tapers off, right? So, if we've done our job right and they've raised it, the founder now knows what she or he needs to know to, keep going. We've made a bunch of the intros already. If it's 3 years down the road and we're still making intros, you got to ask yourself, well, why didn't you make those intros before? Now, we'll make scattered intros. Like, okay, you needed to be introduced to a later stage VC fund that invests in the Series B. You didn't need those intros before. Now we can give them to you. Maybe when you were like pre-revenue, product not done yet, you weren't ready to be introduced to, say, Sony, right? But now that you've done, you're doing $2-3 million in revenue and you've got some other kind of really referenceable logos on your wall, then, okay, now you're ready to talk to a company the size of a Sony. So maybe, but generally speaking, we should be, if you're that kind of traditional accelerator, we should be specializing in that 0 to 1 phase and giving you all that stuff up front. And then once you raise your A round, you've got other people on your board and they might be better at getting you from like 1 to 2 and 2 to 3.
Okay, sure. And do you specify, do you focus on certain industries, like specific niche industries, or are you just broad?
I focus now. I focus on real estate and construction related startups. I didn't always. I was a generalist to begin with. And then, like I said, I did a little bit of ed tech for a little over a year. And there are reasons why I changed. VCs and accelerators all vary. There are some that are generalists and there's some that focus by industry. I tend to be biased towards the ones that focus because certain things become easier, right? So I have a pretty good feel for what the customers for a particular startup want. When I was a generalist, I've never looked at a company that does, I don't know, materials for fabrics before. So I have to get all the way up to speed. I have to understand what the competitive space is. Are there other startups doing things like this or not? Then I have to kind of get into the mind of the customer. And I've never been in that industry. So that's harder. Now, if it's a space that I'm doing, I know construction tech. Great. Somebody comes to me with a robot that's cleaning trash chutes. True story. I'm like,
A robot that's cleaning what?
Trash chutes, like the garbage chutes in buildings.
Oh,
Now I'm like,
wow.
I've never seen that before. That's really rare, right? I might ask around to confirm it, but if I haven't seen it before, it means it's probably a new idea. Rare enough that happens at all, but because I'm in the space so deeply, I can actually rely on that. And also, I know building owners. Right? I know what they think about it. Now, I haven't really dove deep, no pun intended, into the trash chute. I had to ask around, well, how do you clean a trash chute right now? I never really paid attention to it, but I understand the mentality of the building owner. I understand how they feel about doing capital expenditures versus stuff that comes out of operating income. I understand kind of what they feel about certain size checks that they have to write. I could see everything that startup brought to me. I'm like, that's cool. That's actually a pretty easy ask, all things considered. Now, again, if I was a generalist, I wouldn't have any of those instincts.
When you were a founder, when you were building your first company, what did you completely misunderstand about investors and fundraising that now is obvious to you now that you've been on the other side writing checks?
Yeah, pretty much all of it. Early on in my first startup, we had a term sheet, and then 9/11 happened. The VC fund ceased to exist. I wasn't very deep in the process. We went into a couple of different meetings. I didn't go to all of them. I went to some of them. Usually the full team comes in a little later in the process. It might just be the CEO that does the first call or two. We've gotten pretty far down that path. I guess I didn't really understand what a term sheet was. I kind of got it. I didn't understand at all that it wasn't a negotiation. If you have one term sheet, it's kind of a take it or leave it. And the only way that you can really be able to negotiate like the valuation and the other terms of your offer is if you have other VCs who are giving you term sheets as well. I didn't understand that dynamic at all. I also just had this vague concept of like, oh, they have money. I didn't know where their money came from. I didn't know what their time expectancies. I didn't know any of that. And I learned that kind of along the way. But it was really just some dimly understood person in a sleeveless Patagonia vest who was asking all these questions, some of which I didn't quite understand why they cared about, that I was trying to convince to give me money without really knowing where they came from.
What kind of deep questions the investors ask that you'd wonder why? And now you probably know these questions.
So long ago, things like market size, like I kind of get it, but I wouldn't have understood like why they were so fixated on it. I'm like, listen, this is how much we've grown, right? We have all this potential to grow. Like, what do you care about like this theoretical if we got everybody in the industry? And now I get it, right? Eventually we have to exit. And if we don't have the potential to be a 10x or more for the VC, they can't invest in us. Because again, remember, a third of the portfolio goes to zero. And the only way the economics work for a VC is if they have a couple of 10x returns in there or 20x returns to make up for all the ones that like die or the ones that kind of get slow growth but not really big. So they have to believe every time they write a check that this could be a 10x or 20x return. And it's not possible if the market, they can't convince themselves that the market's big enough. I really didn't appreciate that at all. So I might have kind of wondered why they were so fixated on it.
So what are they actually looking for when they're investing in a company? What are they looking for in order to get that 10x? There would be a lot of certain criterias from the investor's point of view, but I also want to know from the founder's point of view as well and the pressure that they have to go through. But what are the certain criterias?
Listen, I'll give you some of the inside baseball from this side of the table. So here's what you got to understand. Everything I'm talking about now are tech startups. There's a whole world of other startups, the more traditional small business startups. I'm quitting my job. F you, boss. I'm going to become my own consultant, or I'm going to go buy the corner gas station, or I'm going to go make a new kind of, I don't know, comfy, right? Or make a brush that has a built-in mister. One of my students last year was working on that. And I'm going to try to sell that. Right? Those are all different kinds of business. They're all entrepreneurial businesses. They're all startups. They're not a tech startup. And the difference is, like, let's say you buy a car wash, you kind of know everything about the car wash, how it works, right? You know how much water you need, how much soap you need, roughly how much labor you need. Like everything in your business model, everything in your P&L all makes sense except for the top line. You don't know. You don't know how many cars you're going to be able to come through the door. So your revenue is the unknown, but the rest of it all makes sense. You got that. If you need money to buy the equipment to run a car wash or to buy the car wash, you can probably get a loan from a bank because they understand how to underwrite a car wash. And if it's not working out, they can seize equipment. Now, for a startup, none of that works, right? Like, I don't forget about the top line. I don't even know how I'm going to charge. I may not know who I'm going to charge, right? Do I charge the individual user, or like, do I charge a student, or do I charge the college for a service if I'm selling there? If I'm going to charge the student, do I charge them a flat fee in the beginning, or do I charge them a monthly subscription? If it's a subscription, is there a free version? And if there's a free version, where's the line? But I don't know any of that. And I may not really even understand my costs very well because there's certain things I just don't know until I try. I mean, I should know some of it. And I'm going to need a year to build this before any revenue comes in. It's not like a consultant. Like the moment I get a client, I can go to work. So try to go into a bank with that. You can't get money from a bank. So the only thing that kind of company has, the only option they have, other than friends, family, and fools, are angel investors and VCs. So we are, for that small corner of the entrepreneurial ecosystem, that weird little corner, VC is the least worst alternative for them because they can't get money any other way. Everyone else has more options. Right? It's not glamorous to get money from VC. It's a necessary evil. If you can get your money somewhere else and not give away like 20% of your company, power to you. So that I wanted to put that in mind, right? So keep that in mind. Now, what do I think is a VC? So if I want a company like that, remember, I have to believe the company has a potential to be 10 or 20x, maybe even 100x. So I look at the market size. Right? If it's not $1 billion total addressable market, and I'm not saying the company will get all of it, but if it's not that big, it's going to be hard for them to make a lot of money and get big enough because there's just not enough headroom. And I hate to win and not make money. So I'm looking at the total addressable market to see if it has that potential to get there. I need companies to grow at a certain speed also, or else it doesn't make sense because I raise my money. My fund is probably a 10-year fund, which is a misnomer. 10-year fund means I can go 12 years before I have to ask permission to keep going. But I have a 10-year fund. I have to believe that this company can get big enough to be acquired or go public in that period of time. So I can get my money back when they exit and give it to my investors. So I certainly can't make an investment in the 5th year of my fund. There's just not enough time. Like I can only make a follow-on investment. I can't make a new company investment. I can only make my new company investments in the first 3 years. And I have to believe that the company can grow at the right speed to get to an exit within that time period. So I'm looking at the financials. First time I see the financials, like the only thing I know about a company's financials are, I know they're going to be wrong. That's the only thing I know. Right? When I dive into the model, it's definitely wrong. I'm doing it to like understand how the founder thinks about her business or his business. But when I'm looking at that one slide in the deck, before I'm getting the Excel spreadsheet or the Google sheet and literally looking into it deep, I just want to make sure that the rate of growth that they think they can do is fast enough to be the kind of company I can invest in and exit, at a good number at the right period of time, and not so fast that the guys are totally smoking dope. Right? It's got to be that right kind of Goldilocks zone of like fast, but not impossibly fast. And the rule of thumb would be for a software business, it'll double or triple every year for the first couple of years. Though with some of the AI companies, they scale, they can do 10x, but that's an exception to times your revenue in a year. If a company comes to me, they're going to say, I'm going to 10x my revenue in a year, they're probably not realistic. Right? So I'm like, no. And if they tell me in 5 years they're going to be at $2 million in revenue, they're just not growing fast enough to be venture backable. So I'm looking at big market, and I'm looking for that kind of growth trajectory that fits in with what I need to return to my investors. And there's a lot of companies that don't fit that mold and that can make a lot of money for the founders. They're just not the kind of companies that can raise money from VC.
And get scalable. And you've seen how capital changes the founders as well. So you've seen founders before and after the money comes in. How does the capital actually change who a founder becomes? And, when you said that, to say if it grows, the company grows too fast, I've heard of stories how the VCs, the software, like back in the internet boom, when they had so much capital, just a lot of it crashed and burned. So what should people watch out for?
There's actually 3 questions in one there. I think 3, maybe even more. So how does it change the person? I'm not going to go into like the deep psychology of like, oh my God, now I've got money. The irony is sometimes the founder doesn't change fast enough, right? So at first they're so used to scrimping and saving and bootstrapping and doing everything the hard way because they just have the money to play with. Then they get enough money and sometimes they're not spending it fast enough. So I'll give you like a silly example. They're used to hiring through their own network. Well, that's great when you're young and you need some people and you don't have any money. But when you started taking VC money and they need you to scale quickly, like hire a headhunter. It's going to cost you more, but getting the right, like say head of sales in 3 months instead of 6 months means you had that person working and generating revenue for 3 more months than you would have otherwise. When the clock is ticking, you're running out of money before you need to raise your next round. So sometimes the founders, they're still stuck in that like cheap early stage, like seed stage, no money, and they don't spend the money. They have to change, and they haven't like evolved into that. The thing that it does more than changing the mentality of the founder is it changes who they're answerable to. So there's a very interesting book. It's not mine in this case, called The Founder's Dilemmas. And one of the examples they put out is like, if you're a founder, you have to decide if you want to be rich or if you want to be the king. And what it means by that is if you want total control, you can't raise money from someone who's going to take a chunk of your company. If you can't raise the money, right, you don't raise money, you can grow slower, or hopefully you can still grow. You may fail. But at least if you can grow, you'll grow slower, but you'll be the king of that smaller company, 100% owner. On the other hand, if you want to grow faster, you got to take money from somebody on the outside. Now you got someone who owns 20% of your company or 25% of your company. And they have certain rights to block certain movements to protect their investments. So if you wanted to sell the company, like these investors, like, yeah, I know I only have 25% of your company, but I have blocking rights. It's called governance provisions. Right? You cannot sell unless I approve it.
Wow.
So you can be rich, but now you're not the king anymore. So it doesn't so much change who the founder is, but the constraints under which the founder now has to work.
I can imagine how important it is to have the right people backing you up then, because it has to be a good match. You know, it's like a relationship in a way. You're just buying into the business, but you're making decisions as well. So have you got any great stories or bad stories of when money comes in, and then what are the biggest failures that you've seen after money comes in, besides the ones that you just mentioned?
Linda, it is easier to get divorced than it is to get an investor off your cap table if it's bad, right?
Wow.
It is much harder. And they're on for the duration. Like if they don't want to get off, if they don't want to like sell to somebody new, you got nothing. Like you cannot get rid of them. Catholic marriage, no such thing as divorce. So it is hard. I got to choose it right. One of the things that I tell founders is you got to run your process well so you have multiple options. If you don't have multiple options, like that's the one investor you can choose from. It's take the money, die, and you can't get better terms, but you also can't make sure you have the right fit because you have no other options. And you'll get into situations where you've got investors that have a different view of where the company should go than the founders. Sometimes they're right, sometimes they're wrong. But if you got a bad guy and they're over on top of you, sometimes you can force the founder out. And to be really honest, sometimes it's the right move because the founder doesn't have what it takes to get to the next level. That means, oops, I guessed wrong, but I don't want this to be a total failure.
What's the secret weapon behind every top CEO and entrepreneur? A game-changing executive assistant. Hermessi gives you access to elite EAs who supercharge your productivity. From payroll and admin to social media and customer support, they handle it all so you can focus on growth and big picture decisions. These aren't your average assistants. They're expertly trained, thoroughly screened, and equipped with the latest AI tools to work smarter and faster. Ready to delegate and dominate? Get 15% off your first 2 months with code INSPIRE15. Don't wait. Visit Hermessi, that's HERMESSI.com, and take back your time today.
So let's see if we can bring someone else in either to help or replace the founder. But from a founder's perspective, and let's assume the founder is a relatively good founder and doesn't want to be forced out, the best way you can protect yourself against that is to make sure you've got a good VC behind you. So I tell them, run the process so you have multiple options, and then check references. Talk to the portfolio companies. Find out what the VCs are like. And the trick here, this is the inside baseball trick. Are you familiar with the site called the Internet Archive or the Wayback Machine? So you Google it a little later. I think it's archive.org, but just type in Wayback Machine. And what it'll do is it's a search engine that will show you what a website was like at various points in the past, time capsules of that website. You want to go to the VC's site and to the portfolio page of that VC's site and look at what the portfolio companies were over time. The winners will always be on that website, on that webpage. The losers may quietly disappear. So look for the logos that quietly disappeared. Find those founders, because how a VC treats a startup that didn't perform, that wasn't a 10x for them, tells you a lot more about the character of that investor than how they treat their star pupils, their favorite sons. That's one of the things you can do if you have the option. Can't do it if you only have one investor giving you a term sheet. But if you have, say, 3 term sheets or 2 investors that are interested enough to give you a term sheet, you want to go that extra distance and figure out what kind of person you're getting in bed with.
You mentioned the systems as well. Like, do you guys in the early stages look for the founders who have great systems in place and processes, or do you help incorporate that as well and just to see what can be improved? How does that work? Because obviously, if you want to scale, you need to have the proper systems in place and
Yeah.
process.
So it varies. At the earliest stage, a founder that's got a hyper defined process can actually be a negative. So at the
Rigid.
earliest stage, you're still learning what the market wants. I made that mistake as a founder. A zillion different pricing plans. We need to rationalize it. And like my co-founder, the CEO, pulls me inside. He's like, Andrew, we just got to say yes. We need more customers. A, we need the money. But B, we need to be close to our customers. We need to learn from them what they actually need or not. So like, let's not fight. Let's not push back. $9.98 a customer, $9.95, $10. Who cares? Your spreadsheet will be a little messy for a year or two. You just got to say yes at that stage. You got to be flexible. And then as you go further, as you go from that stage where it's like 8 of you around a conference room table and you can just kind of talk things out. And now you got 20 people, 40 people. You've got people who report to other people. That is not just the CEO and everyone else in the room. Then really you need more processes. You need the technology that supports it to help them scale. So it varies over time. The kind of rule of thumb, I would say, is until you get to the seed round, what you're trying to prove is, do I have product market fit? Right? Do I have something that someone else will actually pay good money for? And that's what the seed investors are looking for. And then when I give you that money as a seed investor, what I want you to do is next step is I want you to optimize your sales process. Whether you're B2C or B2B, I want you to think about how you go to market. It's a technical term. Let me roll that back. I want you to think about how you sell. You want to think about what your sales funnel looks like. What do you say to a prospect? What percentage of them convert from like prospect to qualified all the way down until like you actually get the money or not? And I want you to be able to document this, turn it into a process, because you, the founder, can't be doing all the sales. You need to find someone else who can be the head of sales or the head of marketing. Maybe they're your co-founder, and they need to be able to build a team with a repeatable process that you can keep tweaking. It's a little better, a little better, a little better. So I just need you to have product market fit for the seed round, but for the A round, I want to see that you've got that process in place and it's working. You can acquire customers at a cost-effective way. It doesn't have to be perfect. You're going to continue to optimize it, but it's got to be good enough, right? Because product market fit is great, but if you can't find the customer without spending more than it's worth, that's not a good thing. The next step after that, like after you've got that, you've got a head of sales in place, you've got 4 or 5 people working for you on it. They're over on their own side optimizing it. You as the CEO now need to start thinking about what are the big new opportunities that move the top line 20 or 30% at a time. And it might be an adjacent industry. It might be another geography. It might be a new product to add on, a bolt-on product, which either you build or you acquire. Maybe you're going to acquire other competitors that are smaller than you and not making it, get their customers and grow that way. But coming out of the Series A, going into the Series B, like you as a CEO need to start thinking about different things and building different things. So it's not the taking of the money that changes you. It's not who you are as a person that dictates the kind of processes and tech that you need to have in place. It's the state that your company is in, the stage that your company is in. And as it grows, it needs different things and you need to be something different for it, which is why sometimes you end up replacing the CEO, because a CEO that's great at doing 0 to 1 may not be good at getting from 1 to 5. There's no shame in that. The best CEOs, if they're not that person, will say, that's not me. Let's bring in a professional CEO and I'll keep working on product, or I'll keep working on I'll be the CTO, whatever it might be. That was a bit of a long answer, but that's what we're looking for in a founder, in the sense like process versus being in that exploratory, flexible stage.
Yeah, I can imagine there's personality types where it's like they've built this baby, they don't want to let it go. It depends on how their ego is. And yeah, the ones that probably let go and know that someone else could do it better and they just do another role that they're passionate about. So I've heard so many different stories about that. When you see a founder heading towards trouble and they're confident they're right, how do you get through to them without shutting them down?
At that point, the truth is I'm probably screwed. It meant I chose badly.
Oh, okay.
It does. If they're at that point and they're not listening, that's a bad sign. So when I come in there, like I'm looking, we sometimes call it coachability. I'm looking for someone who's coachable, but I'm also looking for someone who has thought it through and has a good reason to do what he or she is doing. Catchphrase, and I wish I could remember who told me this because it sums it up perfectly. We want founders who have well-reasoned but loosely held opinions. So if somebody comes in and says, Linda, hey, I don't think you should be doing this B2B. You should really be a B2C company. Your response should not be, oh, yeah, okay, I'm going to change everything. You shouldn't be a weather vane, whoever you spoke to, like, last person to speak to you. That's the advice you take. You should be, well, Andrew, that's really interesting. We chose to go the B2B route because, right, lay out your reasoning. I'm curious, Andrew, why you think this would be better as a B2C company, right? So you're open to it. And then I have to tell you, well, so honestly, Linda, I've seen 12 companies try to do this on the B2B side. The sales cycles are too long. It doesn't really work. But unlike those, you have the potential to be a direct-to-consumer company. And I don't see anyone else doing that. It might be worth it. And you might then decide, that's really interesting. I didn't know that the other companies that were trying to be B2B were struggling. That's data I didn't have. This is me speaking for you. Why don't I test something on the B2C side? Let me just test it and see if I'm not picking up the phone and trying to sell this product for 50 grand a pop, to a company. What if I'm trying to sell it direct to consumers for $10 a month? Let me buy some AdWords and see if I can get anyone to convert. Right? So you're willing to test it. You're open. It's a loosely held opinion. You're willing to change it, but only if there's a good reason to. Only if it's something you didn't know and that changes the calculus you had before. That's what I'm looking for. And if I picked right, I won't get to the point where things aren't going well and I'm going to keep doing this. Right? I won't get to that point. If that's happening, I messed up. I didn't choose the right founder.
Yeah, I like that perspective as well. Speaking of mindset and success mindsets, you've worked with founders at multiple different levels and you've seen a lot. So what beliefs or ways of thinking do the most successful ones share that average founders don't?
Mindsets. Well, other than the loosely held but well-reasoned opinions, there's also this everything is an experiment mindset. So I learned this I remember who told me this. This was Steve Barsh, one of my bosses at Dream It. He used to say before we did anything, okay, guys, finish this sentence. This is a success if, right? What needs to happen? Like, we'll know that this worked if we see this, and it didn't work if we see that. So you going into it, like, you don't just try something because I've done it, right? I've done it, I've run an experiment, I've gotten data back, and I'm like, wait, I don't really know what I proved. And then, or I've done it, and I'm like, well, that's really interesting. Oh man, I really wish I'd also asked X, because that would tell me why this is happening. So you work backwards. It's a mini experiment. To use the example we were giving before, you might say, I don't know if I want to switch from B2B to B2C, but if I can acquire a customer direct to consumer, if the cost per click is under $5, and if 20% of the people that click through end up buying, that would mean it cost me $20 to acquire that customer, and it's $10 a month. Yeah, I got a business, right? I get my money back in 2 months, no problem. So, okay, success for this is the cost per click is $5 or less, and the conversion is 20% or more. So that's the mindset of everything is a little experiment. You know what success looks like, and you work backwards. What's a yes? What's a no? What's a good? What's a bad? That mentality combined with test before you do is a strong combination for a founder.
I like that. And I'm guessing, they're not afraid of failure and taking that little bit of the risk.
Yeah, if you're afraid of failure, you're in the wrong business. But you shouldn't be stupid unafraid of failure. Right? So I gave you that example. Like, some guys are like, yeah, not going to fail. I'm just going to build it. Hold still. Put up a bogus site on Wix or Squarespace. Buy the AdWords for $100 in a week. You can figure out if it's going to work. Right? You don't have to go out and build everything. That's what I mean by test first. If you can test that before you do it, why wouldn't you? Would you rather go out there and spend 3 months building the direct-to-consumer or the B2C site and then run your AdWords and it fails? By the way, I made that exact mistake. my first startup. I did exactly that. But hopefully people will learn from my mistakes rather than on making their own.
A lot of people just build it first before asking the market. Yeah, I like that, running the AdWords to
Yeah,
test
that's a
first. That's
very typical first time founder thing. Like, I got it. I
mm,
understand this massive pain point. I have a vision for the solution. I'm going to go put my hoodie up and just start coding. There were good founders, the repeat founders, like, I think I've got a really good solution to what I think is a really painful problem. I'm going to go talk to 50 customers. I'm going to confirm that it is painful for them. It's not just me. I'm going to run the outlines of my solution, maybe even a mock-up of my site. In the book, I talk about the index card app. Right? I'm going to run that by potential customers. I'm going to mock up every screen of my app using just a pen, which, since I'm a scrappy founder, I probably stole from a bank, and a set of index cards, which, since I'm a law-abiding citizen, I went to CVS and I paid $5 for. But I'm going to write on each one of those, this is what the screen looks like. I'm going to have 20, 30, 40 of those screens. And I'm going to come and say, hey, Linda, I'm thinking about building this app. I want to get your opinion of it beforehand. I mocked it up on these index cards. I want you to interact with these index cards exactly as if it was on your phone. So, tap it, swipe it, do whatever you want to do. Depending on what you do, I'll give you a new screen. Don't ask me questions. I'm not here. You downloaded the app. You can't really call Mark Zuckerberg if something on the Facebook app doesn't make sense to you. The only thing I ask you is whatever you're thinking, say it out loud, because I can't read your mind. Like, I can do that. And for like a free pen that I stole from the bank, $5 worth of index cards, and maybe 30 or 40 hours of my time talking to people, I can find out, do people really care about this problem? What parts of the app that I'm thinking about building matter to them, and what don't they care about? What's intuitive about what I'm thinking about doing, and what's confusing to them? What are they concerned about? I can learn all of that before I write a single line of code. Right? That's what I mean by a great founder or an experienced founder, like, tests before they build. They talk, they confirm their assumptions before they go out there and act on them.
I like that. That's powerful and very useful advice there too. Hopefully something that you could avoid these expensive costs as a founder as well if you're new to the entrepreneurial space. I'm curious to know also, what are the common like the unspoken reasons you pass on a deal that founders almost never realize?
I'll always tell them, but VCs are notorious for what we call the soft no, which is something like, oh, Linda, I really love what you're working on, but you're a little too early. So can you come back to me when you have more traction? Now, that can mean two things. It could mean, I actually really do love what you're working on, but it's too early and I'd like you to keep me appraised. And when you get a little further along, I might invest. Or it could mean, that's the dumbest thing I've seen this week. There's no way I'm touching that. But I don't want to say that, because maybe you wander around in the wilderness for 4 months, getting your butt handed to you. And then by pure chance, you stumble onto the right direction and then it starts to click. And I'm afraid that you're going to think that, well, that Andrew, he's a kind of an asshole. I'm not bringing this back to him because he just told me no. But if instead I said, hey, I really love what you're doing, come back when you have more traction, you might still like me and you might come back later. Right? That's what we're afraid of. I think it's dumb. I think just tell the founder politely with a smile on your face why you're not investing, and they'll come back if it's a different business. So I'm very open about why I don't invest, and I will tell them, right? I'm not investing in your app, Linda, because I don't think the market's big enough. Based on what you're charging and who you can sell to, it's just not big enough for me. If anything changes, come back to me. Or I'm not investing because I'm afraid that the cost of customer acquisition is going to be so high that you'll never make your money back. But hey, work on it. If I'm wrong, come back, let me know. Because if, like I said, I want you to have loosely held but well-reasoned opinion, I'd like to think I have the same thing. So if I'm not investing because the CAC, the customer acquisition cost, is too high, and you come back and you show me data and it's working and it's not, okay, well, that's a different story.
And you might change your mind. What's one key piece of advice you'd like to leave our audience with?
Buy my book. Now, it's a little bit flippant, but the real reason I'm doing that is because this is like 20 years of working with startups. I've invested in 70 of them. I've looked at, and I kid you not, probably 10,000 startups. I've worked very closely with hundreds of startups. So what I've done in this book, in the form of a fictional novel, a novel about a fictional startup, I've packed it with everything the startup needs to know from the moment you basically have a rough formed idea until you've actually closed your first round of financing and the money's in the bank. Right? So it's a vehicle to get all the advice we've talked about, the index card app, this is a success if, all the way through to the last third of the book is all about fundraising. How do you find investors? Right? How do you get connected to them? I've taken it all, I put it in one place. It's a more interesting place because it's not a boring how-to guide. It's actually a novel, I think. And it's got a really cool cover, right? The guy over here, it's like he's got his chainsaw and he's hacking his way through the maze. Yeah. So it's in 4 or 5 hours of reading, maybe 10 hours of reading. I don't know how fast you read. In a day of reading, you can come away with a dozen, half dozen, even if it's just one thing that you can do differently and save 3 months because you tried and tested before you built. That can be the difference between the success or failure of your company. So I would not have written this if I felt there was other ways to get this across. So if you're a founder or thinking about founding your business, or even if you're just kind of curious what this whole thing is about, this is your way to find it in the most concise, most effective, most entertaining way out there. Awesome. And it's also totally self-serving to be genuine.
I mean, I'm sure you could help save a lot of people's headaches and finance, and just sometimes it's good to have that perspective from somebody who's done that and had that experience, especially with the amount of businesses and companies that you've invested in. So I appreciate your time and I wish you all the best. If anyone wants to find you and follow you, where can they connect?
Sure. So if you're the book's kind of interesting, but I'm done hearing this guy, he sounds like a douche, you just go on Amazon. It's The Entrepreneur's Odyssey. There should only be one. My last name's Ackerman. You can find it that way. Get the one with the cool cover, not the library version with the boring black cover or blue cover, or the Kindle. You can get the Kindle version. If you're okay, that was kind of interesting, I might want to find out more about Andrew, you can go to my website. It's Andrew, the letter B as in boy, Ackerman.com. And I'll tell you a whole lot more about me. There'll, of course, be links to the book, but it'll also talk about the other things I do in corporate innovation, teaching. If you're teaching a course, you want to know how this works as a textbook, there's a sample syllabus up there. It's up to you.
Awesome. Thanks, Andrew.